Over the years, there have been different events that prove this blue planet is stranger and more mysterious than many of us care to admit. And even with advancements in technology and science, some things just continue to baffle even the smartest of us. Just when you thought you had this world figured out, boom, something completely incomprehensible happens and you're back to square one. In this video, we'll look at a couple of the most mysterious and outright gobsmacking things to happen or exist in the world and try our best to explain them. Get ready to have your minds blown, people. We're going for another ride. Number 15. The Men in Black. If, like me, you're a fan of Hollywood projects, then you must be familiar with the popular 2002 hit Men in Black that starred Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. Both men starred as special agents who worked for a secret government organization and were in charge of investigating sightings and events from across the world that involved aliens and other forms of extraterrestrial life. These men, dressed top to bottom in black suits, appear whenever there is a reported sighting of an extraterrestrial object and essentially take care of the situation, while also wiping the memories of any humans that have seen these aliens so they don't go about spreading any panic. Well, here's the thing though. While the Hollywood franchise takes things to a bit of a stretch, the Men in Black seem to be real. The legend dates back to June 24, 1947, in what is now known as the Maury Island incident. Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot at the time, claimed that he had seen a string of unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, flying past Mount Rainier in Washington state. 10 days later, Arnold's co-pilot, Captain E.J. Smith, also witnessed UFOs around the Pacific Northwest. Eventually, Arnold's story gained nationwide fame, and he was contacted by Raymond Palmer, an editor, to investigate the matter further. As part of their investigations, they spoke with Harold Dahl and Fred Krisman, two sailors who worked patrols around Maury Island, Washington, and who claimed to have also seen UFOs. According to Dahl, he and Krisman had seen about 6 flying aircraft that looked like donuts. And when they decided to look into the matter further, they were approached by men in dark suits who threatened them not to do so or talk to anyone else about what they had seen. Does this mean that there really is a secret organization that tracks and handles alien sightings and relations? Maybe a Man in Black could visit you if you saw a UFO. Number 14. The Reincarnated Pollock Sisters. The story of the Pollock twins is a pretty weird one. Many people might not necessarily believe in reincarnation, but these girls sure do make a compelling case. In 1957, Joanna and Jacqueline Pollock were killed in a terrible car accident on their way to church. The girls, 11 and 6 years old respectively, lived with their parents in Hexham, England. And as you'd expect, their death became big news, especially since the woman who hit them appeared to have done so deliberately. John and Florence Pollock, the girls' parents, were understandably distraught at this. However, when Florence became pregnant again, John seemed to be adamant that she would give birth to twin girls who would be just like their deceased daughters. Despite the arguments between the couple and even confirmations from doctors that Florence wouldn't give birth to twins, the unexpected happened and the family had another set of twin girls in October 1958. Florence and John named their new daughters Jillian and Jennifer, and this is where things get mysterious. Despite being identical, Jillian and Jennifer were said to have different birthmarks. Jennifer had a mark on her lip which was very similar to the one that Jacqueline had before she died. She also had a mark on her forehead, just like her deceased older sister. Even more mysterious was the fact that the family had relocated to a different town when Jillian and Jennifer were just a few months old. However, as the girls got older, they seemed to remember Hexham in detail, even though they hadn't ever been there. 4 years later, the family returned to Hexham, and what would you know, Jillian and Jennifer were able to remember the town like the back of their hands. They knew their way to the local playground and other major landmarks, just as if they had grown up there all their lives. And there were other weird details too. Jillian and Jennifer remembered the toys that Jacqueline and Joanna played with, and they had similar tastes in music, food, and clothes as their sisters. To be honest, I don't even know what to say about this one. I'll just leave it to you to infer what you will. Number 13. The Voynich Manuscript. Many of us love to read, but what happens when you come across a book that seemingly can't be read? That's essentially the story surrounding the Voynich manuscript, a book so old that all of its contents are seemingly untranslatable. The story of the book dates back to 1912 when Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish bibliophile and antiquarian, was looking through some chests in Villa Mondragone, a Jesuit college just outside of Rome. The Jesuits had decided to sell some of their old collections of text, and they had invited Voynich to appraise the collection to see what could be of value. As he looked through, Voynich came upon an unusual manuscript. It was unlike any that was in the Jesuit collection, filled with strange illustrations and symbols. Throughout the manuscript, there were pages of illustrations of herbs and plants, zodiac symbols, strange tubes bathing women, and even a dragon. Look out, Game of Thrones. For over a century, scholars and experts have pored over the contents of the Voynich manuscript in hopes of deciphering what it means, but still no luck. Some believe that the contents appear to have been written in a language that's lost to humanity, while others believe it to have been made up. Of course, this isn't to say that the manuscript is an enigma. Scientists have carbon dated it, determining that it was written between 1404 and 1438. They also determined that scribes had used iron gore ink to write its text, consistent with material used to write in the early 15th century. Today, the Voynich manuscript is kept at the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University. Number 12. The Tunguska Event. Many people with knowledge about astrophysics and space tend to have one major fear: an asteroid strike. And considering that an asteroid strike was what led to the extinction of the dinosaurs, it's pretty easy to see why many fear it so much. Still, asteroids have collided with the Earth before, and a little over 100 years ago, the largest asteroid impact in recorded history happened, creating one of the most mysterious events ever. On June 30th, 1908, a massive asteroid landed in a sparsely populated forest land above the Tunguska River in what is now known as Krasnoyarsk Krai, an administrative region in Russia. The blast released enough energy to flatten about 18 million trees across an area of about 830 square miles, and witnesses even reported seeing a fireball at the time of its explosion. According to some scientists, the explosion generated energy estimated to have been the same as setting off 15 megatons of TNT. For reference, that's up to 1,000 times stronger than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, Japan in World War II. Here's the thing though, to this day no one has ever found a crater to depict that an asteroid really struck the Earth. I mean, an asteroid strike of such a magnitude should leave some signs that it happened, but the one that struck on this day remains inexplicably absent. Some scientists have opined that the Tunguska event was actually an airburst, with the asteroid instead colliding with the atmosphere and exploding mid-air. Still, would an airburst really have had such a devastating impact? Number 11. The Mystery of D.B. Cooper. As far as crime tales go, the story of D.B. Cooper is quite an interesting one. Cooper is the popular terrorist who hijacked a Northwest Orient Airlines flight on November 24, 1971, and who disappeared before the law caught up to him. Described as a quiet man in his mid-40s, Cooper had appeared at an airport on a regular day and boarded a flight headed from Portland to Seattle. At about mid-afternoon, he handed a note to a stewardess claiming to have a bomb in his suitcase. He asked the terrified stewardess to sit beside him, and she obliged. Cooper went on to show the stewardess proof that he indeed had a bomb in his suitcase, then asked her to give the captain a note. In it, the terrorist asked for 4 parachutes and a total of $200,000 in $20 bills. When the ill-fated flight eventually landed in Seattle, Cooper asked everyone to leave while taking the money and parachutes into the plane. He asked the pilot to set a course for Mexico City and took a few crew members as insurance. However, around 8 p.m. and with the plane between Seattle and Reno, Cooper suddenly jumped out of the plane with the ransom money and the parachute. The pilot soon landed the plane, but Cooper was gone. Months of investigations by the FBI followed, but with nothing to trace Cooper, they closed the case. What was the guy thinking when he jumped out? Was his name even D.B. Cooper? I guess we'll never know. Number 10. The Oak Island Money Pit. For well over 2 centuries, hunters and researchers have flocked to Oak Island in Nova Scotia, Canada, to search for what many believe to be a pit filled with gold and other treasures beyond count. In what is one of the Northern Hemisphere's most intriguing mysteries, this mythical money pit has even claimed several lives. The history of the Oak Island money pit dates back to 1795. As the legend goes, a 16-year-old boy named Daniel McGuinness was crossing Oak Island on a fishing trip when he noticed a few odd things. He saw a few scars on an old oak tree as well as a depression in the ground nearby. McGuinness soon found that the scars were from a rope and tackle system which had been used to lower something into the ground. The inquisitive McGuinness returned to the island with 2 of his friends and they began to dig into that depressed area. Soon after, they found that the ground had pick marks, but they couldn't go further as the pit was sealed with logs and stones. Years later, McGuinness returned to the island and tried digging in that spot again. This time, he and his team found a stone with a strange inscription, but they couldn't translate it. Even more frustrating, the pit seemed to fill with water as they tried digging further. They eventually abandoned the project, and that appeared to be that. However, in 1865, treasure seekers got a clue. James Liechty, a linguistics professor, revealed that the strange inscriptions on the stone translated to 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. And just like that, the hunt for the Oak Island treasure began. In the years since then, Oak Island has played host to different treasure hunters. Even President Franklin D. Roosevelt kept tabs on the island's activity both before and after he became president. And treasure hunters have so far found coins, whistles, ashes, pieces of china, scissors, and others in the Oak Island money pit, keeping the legend alive that even more treasures are buried below. So what could be in there? Gold, money, Shakespeare's manuscripts? Who knows? Number 9. The Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle is one of those urban legends that appears to have taken on a life of its own. However, even though many of the facts around it are not universally acknowledged, hardly any part of the sea scares sailors like this spot. Also known as the Devil's Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle is a section of the North Atlantic Ocean off North America. The triangle has thus far gotten its name for good reason. To date, about 50 ships and 20 planes have said to have mysteriously disappeared on this patch of the sea. Even though there are no agreed-upon boundaries, the Bermuda Triangle has a weirdly triangular shape that is marked by the Atlantic coast of the Florida Panhandle, the Greater Antilles, and Bermuda, a self-governing British territory in the region. Reports of unexplained events happening in the Bermuda Triangle date back to the mid-19th century. At the time, several ships that passed around the area suddenly disappeared or were found completely abandoned for no discernible reason. Other ships transmitted distress signals and were never seen again. Even planes that have flown above the triangle have also reportedly gone missing. Some of them have even been sent by rescue missions to recover ships or other aircraft that vanished there. And interestingly, no evidence of wreckage has ever been found along the Bermuda Triangle. Many experts have tried to explain that the triangle is simply a myth, but I definitely wouldn't want to be a guinea pig and try to fly or sail across that part. Number 8. The Loch Ness Monster. Even though science has now found thousands of species of animals across the world, it's pretty common knowledge that some animals have still not been found or identified. I mean, how would you explain scientists finding species that they previously thought had been extinct? One of the reasons we seem not to have exhausted the limits of creation is that some of these undiscovered animals are at locations where we just can't go. And one animal that has always fascinated many across the world is the Loch Ness Monster. Nicknamed Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster is a large marine creature that is believed to live in Loch Ness, Scotland. Reports of Nessie date back almost a millennium. However, the first written account of Nessie actually comes in the biography of Saint Columba, an Irish missionary credited with spreading modern-day Christianity to Scotland. The biography, written in 565 AD, claims that Nessie had bitten a swimmer in the lake and was set to attack another man when Saint Columba intervened. After he told Nessie to go back, she reportedly obeyed and has only been sighted occasionally ever since. Wow, that man must have had some source, right? Over the past century, tales of Nessie have become even more prominent though. In 1933, a road adjacent to Loch Ness was completed, allowing members of the public to view the lake easily. That year, a couple saw a massive animal, which they compared to a dragon. The incident was reported to a local newspaper, and several other reported sightings soon followed. To date, there has been no credible source that points to Ness's existence. Nevertheless, this is one animal that continues to fascinate millions around the world. Maybe we could drain the entire Loch Ness and see what other animal is lurking beneath those waves. Number 7. The Pyramids of Giza. The Pyramids of Giza are among the 7 wonders of the world, and to be fair, it's easy to see why people wonder so much about them. They show the grandeur and ingenuity of ancient Egypt, one of the greatest and most prominent civilizations in the history of humanity. Back in ancient Egypt, pyramids were built primarily to serve as funeral tombs for pharaohs and other high-ranking government officials. These massive monuments served as public displays of a person's wealth and influence, as well as spiritual relics that depicted ascension into the afterlife. Interestingly, over 100 pyramids were found in Egypt. They come in different shapes and sizes, from stepped pyramids to bent ones. So even though the iconic pyramids of Giza are the most prominent, they're actually not the only ones. Still, there is a sense of mystery surrounding these pyramids. The most prominent mystery is the fact that to date, no one actually knows how the pyramids were built. The largest of all the pyramids is the Pyramid of Khufu, the second pharaoh of Egypt's 4th dynasty. This bad boy is made up of about 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing between 2.5 to 16 tons. Some of these blocks came as far as 500 miles away. But how exactly did the Egyptians build these pyramids without any complex machinery? There have been different theories about how the pyramids came to be, but none so far has any hard archaeological evidence to support it. Looks like these guys had some real master builders back in the day, wouldn't you say? Number 6. The Mothman. The town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia is a pretty historic one, known to many as one of the first battle sites of the American Revolutionary War. This town oozes patriotic history everywhere. However, another thing that this town is known for is the mystery of the Mothman. The Mothman is essentially Point Pleasant's version of the Bogeyman, and while he might not be quite as popular, he's every bit as menacing. Described as a bipedal humanoid with glowing eyes and lengthy claws, he's estimated to be 6 to 7 feet tall and originate from the depths of hell itself. The Mothman was first reportedly sighted in November 1966 by gravediggers working in a local cemetery. A few days later, 2 young couples from Point Pleasant also reported seeing a large figure with 10-foot wings and glowing red eyes. Sightings of this mythical creature continued into the following years, with witnesses all recounting the same feeling of terror and dread. Many locals believe that the Mothman lived in an empty nuclear power plant just outside of the town. As the story goes, he could have been an escaped product of some secret government experiment or project. In any case, the sightings stopped in December 1967 after a terrible accident on the Silver Bridge that claimed the lives of 46 people. Coincidence? I think not. Number 5. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart. Amelia Mary Earhart was an American aviator and fighter pilot who broke the glass ceiling in more ways than one. Easily one of the most celebrated pilots of the 20th century, Amelia's sudden disappearance remains a massive mystery to this day. Born in June 1897, Amelia had been an adventurer with an independent spirit ever since she was a little girl. Even though she initially wanted to start a career in the medical sciences, she took her first plane ride in 1920 and never looked back. She bought her first plane in 1921, and 2 years later, she bagged her pilot's license. In 1932, Amelia made a record for being the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. She completed the flight in a record time of 14 hours and 56 minutes, and 3 years later she was back on the history books after completing the first flight from Hawaii to California, a distance longer than flying from the United States to Europe.
What kind of a sandwich was it?
Chicken sandwich.
Determined for even more success, Amelia decided to take on the big one. She would be the first person to fly around the world. She set out on June 1, 1937, and over the next few weeks, she made several stops. However, exactly a month after the journey began, Amelia was on her way to Howland Island in the Pacific Ocean when she radioed that her plane was running out of fuel. This would be the last communique received from the pilot, as her plane was believed to have gone down some 100 miles from the island.
Speed 140 knots. Lay. Everything okay?
An extensive search was undertaken for Amelia, but she was officially declared lost at sea on June 19, 1937. Amelia's disappearance has continued to baffle many people in the decades since.
We'll repeat this message on 6210 kilocycles. We are running north and south.
Many believe that she crashed into the Pacific, while some claim that she was captured by pirates. Whatever the truth is, we may never know. Number 4. The Mystery of Rongo Rongo. Rongo Rongo is a system of illustrations and graphs that were derived from Easter Island, a volcanic island located a few thousand miles off Chile. On January 2, 1864, Eugene Araud, a lay friar of the Roman Catholic Church, went on a missionary trip to the island. There he came upon ancient artifacts containing different symbols and illustrations. Eugene noticed that several of these illustrations included drawings of different unknown animals, as well as unusual inscriptions. There were about 24 artifacts in total, and even though many of these artifacts were scattered across the island, he managed to gather them up and take them back home with him. However, despite their best attempts, no one has so far been able to decipher what these illustrations actually mean. Many have theorized that these artifacts could offer answers into what caused the collapse of the Easter Island civilization. However, considering that many of them have been burned and weathered due to the effects of time, it is impossible to tell whether the inscriptions on the artifacts are actual writings or just some form of ancient artwork. Number 3. The Tragedy of Dyatlov Pass. The Dyatlov Pass incident is one of the most gruesome reminders that being a daredevil can really take a toll on you, even to the point of death. On February 1, 1959, a group consisting of 10 highly trained and experienced hikers set out on a trail across the popular Ural Mountains, a mountain range located in Russia. One of the group's members dropped out in the early stages of the trek due to ill health, while the rest carried on taking pictures and recording diary entries about their excitement. One of them wrote, "I wonder what awaits us on this trip. Boy, if only he knew." On the first day of the hike, the party of 9 hikers decided to set up camp on the eastern slopes of Kholat-Syakhl, one of the mountains in the range, and that was pretty much that. Overnight, something forced the hikers to panic and cut their way out of the tent, fleeing the campsite and turning out into the night. With heavy snowfall and sub-zero temperatures, the hikers stood no chance. Weeks later, their bodies were found scattered across the mountainside, with many wondering what could have happened. Investigators looked into the tent and discovered that it had been slashed open from the inside, a sign that the hikers were desperate to leave. After their bodies were discovered, Soviet authorities launched an investigation. They found that 6 of the hikers had died from hypothermia, while the other 3 had been victims of physical trauma. One victim had massive skull damage, while 2 had severe chest trauma. Another victim had a cracked skull, while 3 bodies had damaged soft tissue on their heads and faces. In general, the investigation concluded that a compelling natural force had caused the deaths, but that just doesn't seem to tell the full story. 2 of the bodies had missing eyes, while 1 had a missing tongue, and 1 was also missing its eyebrows. Would an avalanche do that? You tell me. Number 2. The Mystery of Mary Celeste. No, Mary Celeste wasn't a person, although that would be a pretty kick-ass name for a child. Instead, this name was given to a 282-ton brigantine ship. Mary Celeste was a pretty interesting ship. It was built in 1861 at Spencer's Island in Nova Scotia and was actually named Amazon. However, the ship suffered several mishaps in its early years. On its maiden voyage, the ship's captain contracted pneumonia and died. It also had a massive wreckage in 1867 when it ran aground in Cow Bay, Cape Breton Island. The ship was eventually purchased by Richard W. Haynes in 1868 and it was renamed Mary Celeste. After undergoing significant structural changes, it was eventually sold to a group that included one Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. On November 7, 1872, Mary Celeste set sail from New York with over 1,700 barrels of alcohol. The ship was sailing for Genoa, Italy with 10 people on board, including Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter. Over the next 2 weeks, the Mary Celeste encountered some pretty harsh weather. Its final entry came on November 25th, when the ship was said to have been a few nautical miles from the Azores. 10 days later, the Mary Celeste was spotted by a British ship. The crew from there boarded the Mary Celeste, only to find it completely deserted. The vehicle was still very seaworthy, and all of the cargo, including the alcohol and all crew members' personal belongings, were intact. A longboat was missing, hinting that the ship seemed to have been quickly deserted. Thus ended the seafaring days of the Mary Celeste. Given its history of mishaps, no one was keen to have anything to do with the ship. But the major question remains, what on earth happened to its crew and Captain Briggs's family? My guess is as good as yours on this one, guys. Number 1. The whereabouts of Area 51. Hey, we started this series with something alien-based, and we'll be ending it with a similar theme. You've probably heard about Area 51. It's the weird secret place in horror and crime movies where the US government and military reportedly conduct some of their most clandestine research and experiments. In case you didn't know, Area 51 actually exists in real life. It is a US Air Force base located at Groom Lake in southern Nevada. Area 51 is operated by Edwards Air Force Base in Southern California, and while the military has been adamant that the facility is only being used for flight tests, the conspiracy theories have kept coming. It also doesn't necessarily help that the government has been very secretive about the activities going on in Area 51. When you step into the facility, you get to see an assortment of different intimidating warning signs, and beyond the gate, cameras literally watch every single thing you do. There's even a white pickup truck in the distance that locals say is capable of monitoring every rabbit and tortoise in the desert. And besides all of this, Area 51 has also played host to some pretty interesting work. For instance, it was the site where the Air Force tested the popular U-22 jet, which the government uses for top-level reconnaissance and intelligence work. Some sources also claimed that nuclear weapons were tested on the land close to Area 51 between 1950 and 1990. Bob Lazar, a man who claimed to work at the facility as a physicist, has also come out to confirm that there is indeed alien activity going on in Area 51. And back in the 90s, a lawsuit was filed against the government, alleging several workers in Area 51 died from exposure to an unknown poisonous substance. It is also worth noting that while Area 51 has been in existence since at least the 40s, it was only confirmed by the government in 2013. So what have they been cooking up there for the past few decades? If the government wasn't trying to hide something, why go through all this trouble? I'd definitely love some answers, wouldn't you? The world we live in is a very strange one, and over the years, different events have attested to just how mysterious it can be. Conspiracy theories aside though, I actually do believe there's much more to this big blue planet than meets the eye. However, the only question I'd like to know right now is whether there are actually aliens and whether they're seeing some of this weirdness too. What do you think? Drop a comment below and let us know.